Hello there, my name is Alan and welcome to my channel. Thanks for joining me again on another video. I've done quite a few of these showcase videos now, just giving you a bit of an introduction to my collection. I thought I'd share with you this video of 28mm ancient Greeks. This is a mixed army built from foundry, gorgon, and possibly that's about it, I think, in terms of the actual manufacturers. This is the army that I care most about, if I'm honest. It's the one that's taken me the longest to put together. It sort of crystallizes my interests in ancient Greek history, birth of democracy, that sort of general classical period. But also it's full of character, it's full of colour, and it's just a really interesting period, I think, to give you that sort of impetus, if you like, or that spark for carrying out projects. All of the shields, well, all of the figures here are painted by me. All of the shields are hand painted. I'm pleased with most of them. Some of them, when I look at them, I think, maybe I could have done those a little bit better. You'll recognize some of the patterns from Greek books, etc. I've made sure that everything I've painted, I would say everything. I would say largely everything that you see is a historically plausible, let's put it that way, shield design. At the back there, you can see a couple of units that we've got with Greek lambdas. Those two are the actual sort of city-state moniker or emblem for ancient Sparta. We believe now, and I say we, but I mean classic historians believe that most of the elite Greek troops in Sparta used their own personal shield designs rather than state lambdas, certainly for most of the classical period anyway. So those guys are really sort of designed to simulate the parochii, or the or the dwellers about, as they were known in ancient Sparta, and perhaps some of the freed slaves, etc. But my crew are very definitely more heavily armoured and more representative elite troops, but it was just a bit of fun in terms of painting the figures. The standard sort of approach I've taken here with all of these Greeks is to use foundry paint system with a 3-colour sort of triad model. In principle, there's a couple of sort of washes that have been used. I've gone for, again, historically accurate sort of reds with the Linthrax leather armour in sort of like a white and off-white coloration. And more than anything else, I've ended up with more Greeks than I thought I would be, and this is probably the second or third bunch that I've ended up painting, and I've been trying to improve my technique as I've gone through. I've used a variety of troops in terms of the overall composition of the army. So I've tended on this video, we're seeing on the flanks, we're seeing some of the lighter troops, or the peltas types, which you can see here, which came into vogue as the classical period progressed, and most of the sort of strategic and tactical thinking became a little bit more, should we say, modernized for the times. So Greeks were very still keen on their hoplites, or that central core phalanx, but these guys started to appear to give them that sort of tactical maneuverability and flexibility. The actual phalanx units themselves, as I said, really a mixture here of foundry and gorgon figures. And if we take a little sort of look in at some of the figures, you'll see that I like my units to have lots of different variety in terms of pose. That does lead to a few challenges when you're actually putting the figures together, and you have to go very careful that you get the right sort of alignment in terms of spears and positioning in general. And I also like to mix up the shield designs so that we get a fairly sort of good mix. So the army was basically modelled on 4 main contingents of Spartan troops, but painted with enough variety that really, apart from the Pilos helmets and various other sort of accoutrements and the long hair, you can at a push use them for other troop types. I've got a group over here, moving on to the army's right flank, which I've painted very much as a sort of mixed mercenary unit. So these guys here sort of fulfill that sort of role in terms of lots of different variety in terms of shield patterns, lots of different equipment types. The army that I'd sort of based this on was one of the sort of 2 or 3 trips that or campaigns that Sparta did into Asia with some of the sort of generals of the time. Really, there wasn't too much in the way of core Spartan troops, but they would take a lot of mercenaries and a lot of additional allies. And I just wanted to be able to introduce that sort of flavour into my figures. If I just drop back over to the other side quickly, you'll notice that there's a few troops behind them, and then I've got some cavalry as well. I tend to sort of mix cavalry from a few armies, but obviously the bulk of the fighting was hoplite based, so that's why I've got the most of those in the army. If we have a little look at some of the figures, one set of, I mean, I would always recommend foundry figures, but here we've got a nice mix of a Gorgon miniatures figure behind and a foundry figure to the front. And as I said, this one's got a sort of leather style armour. It was composite, many layers of linen, I believe, and I really like the way that that's portrayed on these figures. I can't speak highly of enough of the Greek range in foundry, or for that matter the Gorgon miniatures. The only thing I would say about Gorgon miniatures is if you're in the States, I would always recommend them being your first choice. If you're in the UK, you can get some really good sort of service from Gorgon, but you're just sort of at the mercy of what the Inland Revenue or the HMRC charges you for tax and duties, etc. And I find that a little bit disappointing. But at the end of the day, for me, the time is spent in painting the figures, and I'd rather have good quality figures that I know I'm going to get a good result with. If I just perhaps pick a few of these lighter troops out over here, just to give you a bit of a, and we'll have a little look at the hoplites there. So the light troops there, again, I've used sort of a mixture of the lighter hoplite types as well as specific models for the peltasts from the foundry world of the Greeks. And most of my troops just pull those forward. Yeah, most of the troops are painted in sort of fairly plain style in terms of the uniforms where they have them, say uniforms, tunics, etc. You don't really need too much of that when most of the figures are actually armoured. But obviously Greeks had edging to their tunics. There would have been lots of whites and sort of creams and other colours like that. And obviously the Spartans were famous for their red cloaks actually, and presumably tunics on the way through as well. Most of the officers that you'll see have been painted as Spartans, but I've got a sort of Greek mercenary general on horseback that we'll see over there, and I normally filled him with some Persian units just to act as a leader of that sort of mercenary contingent that Sparta may have taken on many campaigns. But I've probably painted more hoplites than I care to imagine, or sorry, I care to remember, and I've pretty much enjoyed every single group that I've painted. And I think I've learned a lot in terms of how to portray them really, to portray them well. And it's all about the time and effort that you put into practicing some of the techniques. Certainly the shield patterns, personally, I'm not an artist, so I find that the most challenging part of the whole exercise. So some of mine are a little bit simple, but some of the ones that I've painted on, it's just a question of making sure you put some fixed points on the shield to try and effectively, what I tend to do is put little dots on where I imagine the lines going, and then try and draw the lines together in that way. And honestly, if I've made a mistake, I just wipe it off, repaint over the top and start again. I find to paint a black underline is a really useful way of doing it, and I keep the paint fairly well mixed so that it's quite thin, watered down rather than mixed, and that way I find I get an impression that I can work on without ruining the overall effect of the model, and then I can sort of build up that definition. And that's the way that I find it works really, works best. As I say, I could talk about the Greeks for quite a long time. If this is your thing, I'm happy to answer any questions. If you'd like to talk to me about how I've done some of the particular techniques, feel free to drop us a message. Probably going to be the last little showcase for a while. There's a few more armies to go, but it's something that I just want to keep mixing up the content on the channel a bit more. So I think the next few will be more about how I've actually prepared and painted figures, and hopefully you'll find that of interest. Again, let us know, pop a few comments down, hit the subscribe button if this is your thing, and it just lets me know that you're interested. Thanks very much for watching. Hope to see you again soon.